Welcome to the Big Book Roundtable and the RICO 12 family of recovery resources targeted at people from all backgrounds, faiths, and places dealing with addictions of all varieties. Grateful to be here, back together again. It's been a minute since we sat down at this table together with David and Nikki and myself, and grateful to get recording again and get back into the Big Book. I'm joined, as I said, by David G. and Nikki M. And the three of us are living in the miracle of recovery one day at a time. And it's a beautiful life to live. We were just getting caught up on a couple of things here, and it's just good to talk Big Book and recovery, experience, strength, and hope with a couple of my fellows. I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Justin. I'm a recovering addict of multiple varieties, gratefully living the happy, joyous, and free, the generally happy, joyous, and free life of recovery. I live in Spokane, Washington, and it's snowing like crazy right now. I'm looking out my office window, and snow is coming down. I've already shoveled snow once today, and it will happen at least once, maybe twice more today. But I'm grateful to be here. David, why don't you take a second and just get us caught up with who you are and what you're doing?
Absolutely, everybody. Thank you, Justin, for your service as always. My name is David G. I'm from Oklahoma. I'm an alcoholic and an addict of many sorts, a grateful member of AA and AAA and SA as well. And I'm just really, really glad to be here. It's been cold. We've had some bad weather here as well, but the sun's out. It's about 43 degrees, so it's quite nice out this afternoon. Good to be with you guys.
Love it. Thank you, David. And I'm sure, Nikki, it's not 43 Celsius up there in Toronto. But tell us a little bit about what you got going on and how things are going for you.
Well, hi, guys. And I am so happy to be back. I'm Nikki M., and I'm an intelligent agent spearhead of God's ever-advancing creation. I believe my book. And I truly believe that's what I am. Thank you for knowing that it's not 43 degrees Celsius. No, it's negative, I think 17 degrees. One of my bathroom pipes froze. Okay. I was on the phone. God sent me a contractor. It's all handled. On Monday when we were on the noodle show, my furnace froze out or wasn't working. But you know what? I'm just grateful. Even in the dark spots, I have a program, I have a fellowship, and I have two loving brothers right here at the table with me. Everything is exactly as it should be.
Thank you, Nikki. And yeah, this cold weather is no joke. It can really, really mess things up. Thanks for being here, guys. Like I said, it's good to be back together. Today, we're going to jump right back into picking up where we left off reading in the Big Book. We left off last time on page 14 in Bill's story, and we're going to pick up there at the bottom of page 14, and we'll read a full page 15, and the top of page 16. And so everybody grab your 4th edition of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, grab a pen, a highlighter, paper, whatever, get ready to take notes and learn and dig deep as we snorkel through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Here we go with the reading. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They, in turn, might work with others. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. It was fortunate, for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. We commenced to make many fast friends, and a fellowship was grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. I have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted. feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I have seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. In one Western city and its environs, there are 1,000 of us and our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. Man, there's so much in there, and we're just gonna fly through it, but there's so much good stuff in there. David, why don't you first jump in and give us a little bit of background and maybe some of the things that jumped out at you as we read that.
Yes, absolutely, Justin. We know that from our history books that this all took place around December 14th of 1934. We know that Bill never had another drink after this. We know that his spiritual experience was the paragraph just before when you started reading, where he said, while I lay in the hospital, the thought came. Hope that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. We don't think that way when we're in the disease of alcoholism, drug addiction, or whatever it may be. We just don't think like that. So we know that he had a transformation of thinking. Now, he referred to his friend a couple of different times there on page 13, whenever he had taken the sixth step. I think it was the second full paragraph, last couple of sentences. When he talked about his friend with a capital F, he was talking about God. But when he talked about his friend with a small f, he's talking about Eddie. So where you started there today really is the second part of step 12. There's two parts. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps will carry the message, but the other is to practice the principles in all of our affairs, which is part 2, and that's what you picked up on today. So my friend, referring to Ebby, emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating the principles, not just sitting around talking about them. It's great to know the book and talk the book and be this and do that in meetings. It's very uplifting, and we really need that. But it's more important for me, after all these years in recovery, to demonstrate the principles in my affairs, because that's something that I was never really able to do because of lust and the way that it had its grips in me all those years of being sober. And I love what he says. Particularly, it was imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Anytime that I take a man through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the very first thing we do after I go to page 90 and do the interview process with him is come right to this page and read what you read here. If I work with you, if you do this work, there's no doubt the miracle will happen. But when it does, there's a requirement, and I want you to agree to this wholeheartedly, that it is imperative that you work with others the same way I worked with you, not what you've learned from prior ways of working the steps, right? But exactly the way I've taken you through. And most people are good with that. I like what he says, faith without works is dead. But we also know that works without faith is self-propulsion. So, it's easy to do that. And so a lot of people say, just work step, just have faith. But it's also about the work that we do here. So if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life, and we're going to read about a man named Jim in the upcoming chapters over around page 36 of this book, who failed to enlarge and perfect on his spiritual life, which is steps 4 through 9. And we're going to see through that story that working the first 3 steps has its benefits, and it will keep us sober, but it's not enough. For the alcoholic addict of the real variety that the book talks about, the day will come when we'll drink again. And Bill tells us right here, if we fail to perfect and enlarge on our spiritual life through the work and self-sacrifice for others, that's something I never did in my disease. I was always a taker, never a giver. But he gives us a warning here. We cannot survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If we don't work, we'll surely drink. And if we do, then we'll die. And then faith will be dead. With us, it's like that. So this is where he begins to talk about Lois and the way they abandon themselves to the end. I love how he says the enthusiasm to the idea. We're really going to pick up these words, thoughts, ideas, concepts, beliefs, attitudes. These are the things that we must recover from here. If you want to not drink anymore, just don't drink. If you want to get clean, just don't use. Whatever the problem is, sex, food, Just don't do that. But there's something much deeper that we have to recover from here, and it's self. And that's what we're really going to begin to see. But he says that, they abandon themselves to the enthusiasm of the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution to their problem. And that has been the case for me. All the years that I was sober, I was 25 years sober when I was discovered for lust and acting out through the years. And our book is very serious about us drinking again if that behavior continues. So one of the questions I would always ask myself, why did I never drink? I mean, I hate to question God, but that question come up. Well, I think these sentences answer that question, because I never lost the enthusiasm of helping another alcoholic to the solution to their problem. So there were many seasons went by before I would find a solution to mine with lust. But it's like he says, it was fortunate that the old business associates remained skeptical for about a year and a half, which he found little work, but the time did come when Bill was able to rebuild his standing there. But there's a warning there. He says, I was not too well at the time, was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. And this sometimes almost drove me back to drink. So that's something that I really need to watch for in my daily life. Step 10 is very good with that. But I love, he says, I soon found that when all other measures failed, I'd work with another alcoholic that would save the day. And so anytime that I find myself in any kind of trouble, I always turn back to this. Working with another alcoholic, addict, whatever it may be, will save the day. And so I love how he talks about, he goes back to the old hospital. That's Towns Hospital in New York City. On talking to a man there, he'd be amazingly lifted up and set on his feet. And that's a design for living that works in rough going. So if anybody is having a rough going in your sobriety, take a look at the circle and triangle. For me, that's unity, service, and recovery. Am I making enough meetings? Am I practicing the work as outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous? Am I being of service to God and to my fellow man? If any one of those areas are missing, that's probably why life is rough going. So I love what you read there. Bottom of the page. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship. And I think a lot of times, I know at least where I'm at, we would go just because it was something social. The fellowship was more about me than it was about anybody else. Our book is very adamant right here. There's only one reason that we go to meetings frequently. That's so that the newcomer can find this fellowship, not David. I've been here almost 30 years. It's not for me to find the fellowship. It's for them. They seek, and it says in these informal gatherings, we see 50 to 200 persons, and I love this sentence. We are growing in numbers and powers, and it has that asterisk of the spiritual experience. So this is about awakening from self and recovering. And this is exactly what happened to Bill. This is what's happened in my life and your life and Nikki's life and many other people that I know. It's beautiful. The Bill Wilson story is a very beautiful story, but I have to be careful because I can kind of make him a hero at times, which is, it's good and bad. I had a book one time. I went through this work in 1998. I'll finish with this. I went through this work in 1998. And I come back on the last two blank pages of the book. One side of the page was the lineage of Bill and the other was Bob. And it started and it worked its way all the way down. And whenever you got to whoever your sponsor was, then you knew what lineage you had came from. Well, I took this to a sponsor that I once had and I showed it to him. I said, look at this. What do you think about this? And he said, I think you ought to throw it in the trash. And I really got upset with that. I said, really? Why would you say that? And he said, because there's one name that's not there. And I thought it was his. I said, well, we can get your name in there for sure. He said, no, we're not talking about me. We're talking about God. I don't see God's name there. Therefore, it's worthless. Bill, like me, like everybody, he's a man. He's a good man. He's a man that God used, but he's still a man. So this is about finding my way back to a power greater than myself. And that's who I choose to call God. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, thank you, David, for going through that. Really good deep dive in there. Really appreciate your words. Nikki, what are some of the things that jumped out to you as being important to you as we read through there?
Well, thank you. And David, I always love hearing you and Justin, your service and everybody paying it forward here at Rico 12 family. I'm just so grateful for my life. So, right where we left off, I love page 14 because we did read above last episode. It was simple, but not easy. A price has to be paid. And I always bring right back down to the bottom of page 14 right here that it's imperative. I have to work with other people. And I have faith without works, was dead. But I also have circled faith works. See, faith does work. There's two sentences in one. And I sponsor a lot of what you would call dry drunks, people who have been sober, double digits, triple digits, whatever you want to call it. They've been here a long time and they want to die because of this sentence. They just don't read it. For if an alcoholic, how about anyone suffering the disease of alcoholism, fails to perfect and not be perfect? I always have to emphasize that to people. We're not here to be perfect. No one, as David said, not even Bill, is a saint, but we have to improve. Remember, it says that in step 11. It doesn't say maintain. It says we improve conscious contact. Are you improving or are you just maintaining? Because if you're maintaining, we won't survive. It says we won't enlarge my spiritual life through work. And I love this one. This is work, but it's self-sacrifice. I have to stop doing the things I want to do and start doing the things I don't want to do. That's self-sacrifice for others, for everybody, all humans. And it says, I love these warnings. I will not survive the certain. That means things are coming for me. Somehow this was embedded in me before COVID, because during COVID, I lost my job. I lost my rights. I lost everything, but I didn't lose the will to live. I was really taking this book serious. I was self-sacrificing because I was in a low spot. And then of course it's surely to drink again. No, how about think again? My thinking will kill me is what my line out says. It's just like that with me. My thinking will kill me and it will move me right into the waves of self-pity and resentment. I mean, I was just drowning in self-pity and resentment when I was in Luxembourg, and because my boyfriend wasn't doing what I want. It's so simple. It's that quick that it happens. So where it says my wife and I abandoned, I don't have a wife and I don't have a husband. So I put my sponsor and my sponsees and I abandon. Key word, it doesn't say surrender. It says abandon. With enthusiasm. I have to be enthusiastic about this. I have to not only want it, I have to be excited to do it, because this is a design for living. As some of you know, or maybe you and David know, I have a baby in my house. A grand sponsee of mine picked crack, which a lot of us do, our drug of non-choice, over being a parent, and the baby is still here. And babies don't come with an instruction book. But my life does. It comes with a design called the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I know how to parent this baby. I know how to support the family. I know how to be in this, what it says right here, where I commence to make fast friends in a fellowship. These are all promises, this last paragraph, where it is hundreds of family. This isn't just for the alcoholic. This is for anyone whose life is affected by alcoholism or addiction. It sets us on our feet. Right? Feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. Promises. Scarcely any form of trouble or misery. Promises. It's just amazing. And I love what, David ended here on these, like how we meet for the newcomer. But this is where we've drifted. It says informal gatherings. A lot of meetings I go.
Oh, did we lose you, Nikki? I think we lost her for a minute. Okay. What I'll do is I'll continue on here and get to a question, and when Nikki comes back in, we'll jump back in and splice that in. But okay, so David, thank you, Nikki, for your. Nikki, you're back. You're back.
Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry.
All right. So where you froze was a lot of meetings I go to these days are formal. So go ahead and pick up there, and I'll splice it in.
Thank you. So a lot of meetings I go to today are formal. I might as well be in some type of very strict setting. And right here it says informal gatherings. So if you're in a meeting that has all kinds of rules, I know the only rule is to be hard on myself. And the rule is to never hesitate to go anywhere. There's not a lot of rules here. There's a lot of suggestions. So I'm just excited. I know the internet as I'm speaking might be shaky. And that's, again, they'll send a man to the moon, but I can't get internet to my friends in America. Hopefully this message came through. I'm grateful. And I'm grateful to know the most important thing here is that there's certain trials and low spots coming for me. I must do this work or I'm not going to make it.
Thank you, Nikki. I appreciate that. Now, I've got a question for each of you, based on a couple of things that you said and a couple of things we've talked about throughout this conversation. David, I'll start with you. You know, you talked about faith without works is dead, and works without is compulsion. That's something you said, and I've never quite heard it that way, and I really appreciate that. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about how would I differentiate between works without faith as being self-proportion and doing works with faith? How do you make that differentiation in that process?
Thank you, Justin, for that question. Once I awakened from self, I was able to see how it had propelled me into certain types of behavior against my will. Page 54 says that, that we have made decisions based on self. That's not the one I'm looking for. It's being convinced that self manifests in various ways is what had defeated us. And there's two words that really jump out at me there. One is self and the other is us. They're not the same. And see, I didn't know that at the time I was coming through this process. So the way that self propels is that I try to live by faith in whatever I'm doing, not really realizing that self is propelling me to do that. And I'll give you a good example of that in our book. Is on page 53, down at the very bottom paragraph in the chapter We Agnostics. It says, that was natural, but let us think a little more closely. And that's something I never really done, was thought a little more closely, especially about what I was reading. But it says, without knowing it. And those three words are the key. See, I don't even know this is happening to me. I'm being propelled by self. And I don't even know this is happening. But it says, without knowing it, have we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? Now, I always thought this was talking about faith in God, but no, this is talking about faith in my thinking. People say, David, how do you know that? You're saying something that, can you back that up? Well, I can. Let's read the rest of that into the top of page 54. For did we not believe in our own reasoning? How did that work out for any of us? Do we not have confidence in our ability to, keyword here, think? Well, what was that but a sort of faith? You see, I'd been living by faith all along, and I really didn't even know it. And that's what he goes on to say. So in one way or another, we discovered faith had been involved all the time. It's just faith channeled in the wrong direction. It's propelled by self. So faith without any works, it's almost like me sitting on the couch here saying, okay, God's got this. I don't have to do anything. I don't need to worry about that. God's got this. And I've read another book and other books and many other books, but one of the books I read talked about where God worked a certain amount of days, and it's never recorded in history where he ever worked again. So when we come to this program and this process, there's somebody going to be doing the work, but it's not God. Now, I got to have faith that he's going, in his power, is going to take care of that. And, Bill talked about that there at the bottom of 14. But to answer your question, Justin, the faith without me doing this work is just faith. It's almost like step 2. Me coming to a belief is just a belief without any action. It's just a belief. I can believe I'm going to get up and go in here and use the restroom right now, but I can sit here and believe that all day. But unless I get up off my tail, take a few steps that way and walk in there and do certain things, that's not going to happen. I'm just sitting here with a belief. So that's my answer to that. Self propels me in the wrong direction, and I have faith that I can find a solution without God, and that never works out. But like at the bottom of 53, I don't even know I'm doing that until I'm beating a corner, and I have to surrender and find a way out. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, thanks for your answer, David. I appreciate you walking through that. There were a couple of things you shared there that I had never really processed, like, God worked a certain number of days and it's not recorded that he worked more. What do I need to do with that? No, that like it's tickling something in my brain, so I'm going to do some thought on that. Nikki, I have a question for you. The line certain to keep us, let's see, where does it read that? Certain trials and low spots ahead. Anyways, the phrase that leads into that, oh, here we go. We could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead if we didn't do these things. Nikki, you've shared that just in the last few days since you've been back, your heater stopped working, your furnace stopped working, pipes froze. Life is hard. Life happens. How do you maintain a sense of sobriety, a sense of level living, even keeled living in those certain trials and low spots?
Wow, that's a powerful question. Thank you. And like right now, when I'm not sure if my internet's working, I switched to 5G off my home internet. Hopefully the sound is better. How do I deal with these things? Well, I remember who I am. See, I remember I've been reborn. I introduce myself a lot as an intelligent agent spearhead rather than, hi, I'm an addict, or I'm this and that, because I've been reborn. I remember I am the daughter of the creator of the universe. That's number one. I remember how I have to show up to life, holding my head tall. As God's people, we stand tall. We don't crawl before anyone, is what my book says. It also says God gave me brains to use and not to drift into morbid reflection about how I used to be. See, how do I keep my head on straight when these things, I remember that the promises are huge. I remember that God will do for me, because I have euphoric recall on when things have happened, and God, isn't it? No weapon. I read another book too, David G. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. And I believe these things. So that's how I am able to deal with these certain trials and low spots. I forgot to touch on, when you asked me, we were skimming through this. I soon found that when all other measures failed, see, I'm beyond human aid. I know that about myself. Nothing is going to help Nikki M. Nothing except working with another addict. How about being a servant of God? There's no question here for me anymore, Justin. Is there something I need to do? Is there something I need to attain? Some accolade, some type of valid? No, I've got the highest accolade, the highest title you can have, a servant of God. I've smashed the idea that I'm like anybody. That's what the book tells me to do. Not that I'm just not like another addict or another person who suffers the disease of alcoholism. I'm not like anybody on the planet. And it can sound like, well, Nikki's so conceited. No, I'm sure. I'm 100% convinced. Why? The consciousness of my belief is sure to come to me. So the consciousness of this belief, I am special. And the reality of it is, we all are. We just forget it. It's really radical stuff here. Thank you.
And thank you, Nikki. Man, good shares, good insights into those questions. Now, what I'd like to do is just ask you each to give me a quick takeaway. I've got a quick takeaway too, and I'll follow up with my takeaway from what we've read that you can apply in your life. David, what is one real quick takeaway that you've got from this reading and this conversation today?
That we are growing in numbers and power. There's power in numbers. And so come be with us, unify, get into the spirit of the fellowship of the spirit, however you want to word that, because there's power here. And if I'm powerless, the one thing that I need is power. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. And that reminds me that there was an asterisk at the end of my reading today that I did not go down to. It says, as of 2017, AA is composed of over 118,305 groups. And I guarantee you that has exploded in the age of Zoom meetings, and that doesn't include all of the other fellowships. That's just AA. We are growing in numbers and power. Come join with us. Nikki, what is one takeaway that you had from our reading and discussion today?
Self-sacrifice. This is about self-sacrifice. I'm staring at the three of us on the Zoom meeting. It's like, you have a big life, Justin. I know David G has a big life, and you guys are self-sacrificing to come here and do this weekly when we do it. And this is a life about sacrifice. So if you're not willing to pay a price and you're not willing to stay here, I'm not afraid to tell you, it's a jungle out there. Stay and sacrifice with us, because if you're like me and my friends, we're in the grip of a progressive illness. We get worse, never better. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. And man, I really appreciate that. My takeaway was from the reading, and we touched on it just a little bit in this conversation, but this is something that I really stuck out to me. I was not too well at the time. So Bill, he's sober. He's out of the hospital. He is working with others. And he says, I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment that sometimes nearly drove me back to drink. But I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. You know, just because I'm sober, just because I'm abstinent, just because I'm clean does not mean I am well. If I am not losing myself in self-sacrifice, as Nikki talked about there, in the work with others, in applying these principles in all aspects, all of my affairs, I can still be driven to insanity. Still be insane. But as I live in the solution, even in these certain trials and low spots, even when trouble hits, I can remain connected with my higher power that will pull me through it. Thank you both for being here. Everybody out there in the listening audience, if you would like to connect with David or Nikki and see what they're doing, we've got information in the show notes of the podcast. Go check it out, what they're doing in their recovery worlds and their lives. And if you have questions for us, send an email to rico12pod@gmail.com. We'd love to, maybe address a question here or there. Come join with us in the fellowship of the Spirit and come trudge this adventurous and amazing road of happy destiny with us. Work it. You are worth it.